Before you create your character, you see that race selection screen. Humans, orcs, night elves, gnomes. You read the descriptions promising mighty warriors, ancient wisdom, technological genius. What they don't tell you is that half these races have suffered casualties that would end most civilizations. We're not talking about losing a battle, we're talking about 80% population extermination. We're talking about entire homelands destroyed. We're talking about curses that strip away your humanity and leave you a feral beast. The Lightforged Draenei reskins as content. The Lightforged Draenei aren't the worst because of tragic lore. They're the worst because they shouldn't exist as a separate race. And Blizzard charged you a reputation grind to unlock them. Battle for Azeroth introduced allied races in patch 7.3.5. New customization options that told unique stories, rewarded dedicated players, added depth to the faction roster. Cool. Except half of them were reskins, and the Lightforged Draenei are the worst offenders. They're regular Draenei with a shader effect, golden tattoos, that's it. Blizzard created a new playable race by turning up the brightness slider and calling it Holy. You want to play a Lightforged Draenei? First, complete the entire Argus questline from Legion, then grind reputation with the Army of the Light to Exalted. That's weeks of daily quests, like world quests, rare spawns, treasure chests, 3 to 4 weeks minimum if you're efficient. All to unlock what should have been a barbershop customization option. But here's where it gets worse, Bosh. Compare Lightforged racial abilities to regular Draenei. Regular Draenei get Gift of the Naru, Singer, an instant heal over time that scales with your level. Useful in every situation, Lightforged get Light's Judgment, you call down Holy Fire that damages enemies in an area and triggers a 3-second stun after you die. So your racial ability's best feature activates when you fail, when you die. That's your reward for weeks of grinding. The models are identical, same skeleton rigging, same animations, same running cycle, same casting animations, same emotes. Data miners confirmed they share 95% of their assets with base Draenei. The 5% difference, glowing yellow tattoos and slightly different eye glow. You can transmog regular Draenei armor to look identical to Lightforged, wear golden pieces and nobody would know the difference. In the lore, Lightforged Draenei are Army of the Light members who fought the Legion for millennia on Argus. Okay, fine, but so did regular Draenei who stayed behind. Velen and his followers fled. Others remained and joined the Lightforged. The questline in Legion shows you meeting both groups. They fight together, share the same goals, worship the same light. The only difference is the tattoos prove you stuck around instead of fleeing. That's not a new race, that's a character background option. Here's what really exposes this. You can't make a Lightforged Death Knight. Death Knights were raised during Wrath of the Lich King, before Legion, before Argus, before anyone knew Lightforged existed as a distinct group. So Blizzard would have to explain how a Lightforged Draenei died, got raised by the Lich King, then somehow still had their holy tattoos despite being filled with undeath and shadow magic. The contradiction was too obvious. Solution? Lightforged just can't be Death Knights. Move along. Players on the WoW subreddit immediately called them out. Yellow Draenei, Goldforged, Tattoo, DLC. The community coined the term reskin races specifically because of Lightforged and their horde equivalent, High Mountain Tauren. At least High Mountain got antlers and new totems. Lightforged has a brightness filter. Compare this to Void Elves, another allied race released the same patch. Void Elves have different idle animations, void tendrils in their hair, unique racials that actually change gameplay, shadow effects on all their spells. You can tell a Void Elf from a Blood Elf instantly. Lightforged. Stand them next to a regular Draenei in golden armor and good luck telling them apart. But wait, there's more. The starting experience. When you create a new Lightforged character, you spawn in the Stormwind Embassy. An NPC gives you generic dialogue about serving the Alliance. Then you're kicked to your capital city to start leveling like every other race. No unique starting zone, no quest line showing your millennia fighting the Legion, no story about adjusting to Azeroth after an eternity of war. Just a mailbox with some starting gear and a good luck. Meanwhile, Void Elves get Talagris Rift, Dark Iron Dwarves get Heritage Armor questlines, Zandalari gets an entire patch worth of story. Lightforged, you get a conversation and a teleport to Stormwind. That's your reward for weeks of reputation grinding. The reputation grind itself is the content. Blizzard didn't create a new race, they created a time gate, a checkbox for completionists, a test to see if players would accept minimal effort as reward. And we failed that test by unlocking them anyway, proving to Blizzard that reskins with rep requirements could pass as new content. This isn't mysterious storytelling. This is Blizzard discovering they could reuse assets, slap allied race on them, and charge you time investment for the privilege. Lightforged Draenei aren't a race, they're a lesson, a warning about what happens when players accept minimum viable products as expansion features, but at least the Lightforged chose their path. They volunteered for the Army of the Light, earning their tattoos through millennia of service, unlike one race on Draenor that only exists because ogres captured orcs and forcibly bred them. That's canonical WoW lore, and somehow it gets worse. The Machnathal, half-breeds nobody wanted. The Machnathal are half-orc, half-ogre hybrids, and they only exist because ogres captured orcs and forcibly bred them. That's canonical WoW lore. It gets worse. Blizzard created an entire half-breed race with tragic backstory, established lore, and a legendary hero representing them, then never made them playable. The Machnathal exist in Warcraft as proof that cross-species breeding happens in this universe, and that it happened through violence. Travel to Blade's Edge Mountains in Outland. You'll find Machnathal village, home to these half-breeds living in isolation. Their leader, Leorox, father of the famous hunter Rexar, tells you they're outcasts. Rejected by orcs for having ogre blood, rejected by ogres for having orc intelligence, they exist in the space between, belonging nowhere. Cool, tragic backstory, Blizzard. Now explain how they were created. Warcraft Chronicle Volume 2 covers this. During Draenor's history, before the Dark Portal, ogres ruled massive territories. The Gorian Empire controlled the land, enslaved other races, built their civilization on subjugation. When ogre clans went to war with orc clans, they didn't just kill the losers, they captured them, imprisoned them, and according to the Chronicle, these captives were subjected to forced unions between species. Forced unions. That's the actual text. Blizzard wrote that into official lore. They're describing systematic breeding programs where ogres forced orcs to produce hybrid offspring. The Machnathal aren't just half-breeds, they're the children and descendants of captives who had no choice in their creation. But here's where Blizzard tried to make it heroic. Gunnar, one of the sons of Durotan's father, died helping liberate them. The Frostwolf and Whiteclaw clans lost hundreds of warriors in the battle to free Machnathal from ogre slavery. They succeeded. The Machnathal were liberated. Durotan himself witnessed their freedom. But here's what makes this infuriating. The Machnathal would be an incredible allied race. They have unique models, larger than orcs, bulkier than ogres, and a distinct silhouette. They have established lore spanning multiple expansions. They have a legendary hero in Rexar representing them. Players have requested Machnathal as playable since Burning Crusade, 20 years of requests. Blizzard's response? Make Lightforged Draenei instead, take regular Draenei, add golden tattoos, and call it a new race. Meanwhile, an actual unique hybrid race with depth, tragedy, and visual distinction sits unused in the game files. Because here's the real reason. Blizzard doesn't want to explain the breeding program to new players. Imagine the character creation screen. The Machnathal are proud warriors combining orcish fury with ogre strength. Also, they exist because of systematic sexual violence during Draenor's dark history. Pick this race. Can't exactly put that on a character select screen. Can't sell a $60 level boost for a race whose origin requires explaining war crimes. And it's not just orc-ogre hybrids. The same forced union system created orc Draenei half-breeds. Garona Halforsen, the assassin who killed King Lane in the First War, was originally described as a product of Gul'dan's breeding experiments. Blizzard later retconned some details, but the core fact remains. She's half-orc, half-Draenei, and her existence wasn't consensual, so Blizzard confirmed that multiple half-breed races exist in WoW through similar circumstances. The lore acknowledges it happened, characters reference it, the Chronicle documented it officially, but making them playable? That would require confronting the darkness they wrote into their own world. But at least the Machnathal were an accident of war and ancient history. They weren't deliberately designed to be addicts whose entire civilization revolves around feeding a magical dependency. And that's reserved for another race. One that Blizzard didn't just make playable, they made them one of the most popular races in the entire game. Blood Elves, magical crack addicts. Blood Elves are magic addicts, not metaphorically, not as a character flaw. They are literally physiologically addicted to arcane magic the same way someone is addicted to heroin. And Blizzard made them a playable race. When Arthas destroyed the Sunwell during Warcraft 3, he didn't just destroy the Blood Elves' power source. He created an entire race of addicts going through withdrawal. Their solution? Drain magic from anything they could find, including demons. That's why their eyes turned green. Travel to Silvermoon City. You'll see Wretched attacking guards in the streets. These aren't monsters. They're Blood Elves who lost control of their addiction. Mindless husks that attack anyone for a hit of mana. They're in in the bazaar, in the royal exchange, in the court of the sun, living reminders of what happens when blood elves can't feed their dependency. The lore is explicit about this. During the Third War, Arthas marched the Scourge through Quel'Thalas. Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner fought to slow him down, died trying, got raised as a banshee, and forced to serve him. Arthas used the Sunwell to resurrect Kel'Thuzad as a lich. The well was corrupted beyond repair. Prince Kalthas Sunstrider returned home to find 90% of his people dead and the survivors in agony. Physical agony. The quest text describes it. NPCs talk about hunger, the pain, the desperate need. This isn't, oh no, we can't cast spells anymore. This is withdrawal. The High Elves had fed on the Sunwell's magic for thousands of years. Their bodies adapted. They became dependent, cut off from it. They were dying. Kael'thas made the call. As of this day, we are no longer High Elves. In honor of the blood that was shed throughout this kingdom, in honor of the sacrifices of our brothers and sisters, our parents and our children, in honor of Anasterion, we are Sindore. We are Blood Elves. New name, new purpose, but the same addiction. Here's what they did to survive. They learned to drain magic. From objects, from creatures, from anything with arcane power. Your racial ability as a Blood Elf in Burning Crusade was literally called Mana Tap. You drain magic from enemies to sustain yourself. That's not a spell, that's feeding your addiction. The game made it a core mechanic. But draining random creatures wasn't enough, so they captured demons, imprisoned them, drained their feel energy to satisfy the hunger. Fel magic is demonic power, corrupting, dangerous. Turn your eyes from blue to green. The Blood Elves knew this. They did it anyway because the alternative was becoming wretched, and it worked. Blood Elves maintained their sanity by feeding on Fel. The green eyes became their new normal. Entire districts of Silvermoon dedicated to holding captured demons for mana extraction. The Scryers faction in Shatrath City, Blood Elves who followed Velen's teachings to control their addiction through discipline. The majority, they chose demons over discipline. But here's where it gets darker. Regular High Elves still exist. Some refuse to become Blood Elves. Decrane. They maintain their connection to nature and the light through sheer willpower. No demon draining, no Fel corruption, blue eyes intact. The Silver Covenant, led by Varisa Windrunner, are alliance-aligned High Elves who look at Blood Elves with disgust. They see them as addicts who took the easy path, and they're not wrong. Thus, the choice to drain Fel energy was exactly that. A choice, driven by desperation, but a choice. Some High Elves resisted, they're rare now, but they exist as proof that the Blood Elf path wasn't inevitable. It was survival through any means necessary, including means that permanently changed them. The Burning Crusade expansion shows this in gameplay. You level through Eversong Woods and Ghostlands doing quests for Blood Elves, learning to manage their addiction. Magisters teach you how to drain mana safely. You capture mana-rich creatures for study. You fight the wretched Blood Elves who couldn't handle the hunger, and you see what failure looks like. Silvermoon has entire streets where wretched roam. Guards kill them on sight. Nobody tries to save them. They're too far gone. Once a Blood Elf loses control and becomes wretched, there's no coming back. That's the stakes. Feed the addiction or become a mindless monster. Then, Burning Crusade's storyline revealed Kael'thas betrayed his people. He allied with the Burning Legion, promised his most loyal followers demon blood directly from Kil'jaeden. They drank it, gained power, and became Fel Blood Elves. Green skin, horns, wings, demonic features. They went from we drain demons to survive to we are demons now. That's the logical endpoint of addiction. More. Always more. Kael'thas was defeated in the Tempest Keep raid. His plans to summon Kil'jaeden through the rebuilt Sunwell were stopped. The Sunwell was restored with the heart of the Naru Muru, infusing it with holy light. Problem solved, right? Blood Elves can feed on the Sunwell again. Addiction over? Wrong. The dependency remains. Blood Elves are still physiologically addicted to magic. The Sunwell restoration just gave them a safe source instead of demons. They're functional addicts now. Their eyes are turning golden from the light infusion instead of green from Fel, but they're still dependent. Cut them off from the Sunwell and they're right back where they started. Legion expansion acknowledged this directly, and the Nightborn, Night Elves from Suramar, addicted to the Nightwell, explicitly parallel Blood Elf addiction. Both races bond over shared experience of magical dependency. Thalyssra, leader of the Nightborn, and Lorthamar Theron, leader of the Blood Elves, have conversations about this. They understand each other. They've both led their people through the nightmare of withdrawal and the compromises made to survive. And those Nightborn joined the Horde partially because they felt kinship with Blood Elves. You understand what it's like to hunger is canonical bonding between races. Blizzard treats magical addiction as a cultural trait these races share. Not a disease to cure, not a problem to solve, a shared experience that that builds alliances. The game literally asks you to roleplay an addict. Every Blood Elf player is a functional addict whose civilization nearly collapsed from withdrawal. The wretched you kill in streets are warnings. That could be you. One bad day, one cut off from the Sunwell, and you're shambling through Silvermoon attacking people for scraps of mana. But Blizzard made Blood Elves the most popular horde race. Why? Because they're pretty. They have good models. They stand upright. Players wanted to be attractive elves, so they ignored the lore about systematic addiction and dependency. I just think they look cool, became justification for playing a race whose entire existence is defined by magical substance abuse. This isn't mysterious storytelling. This is Blizzard creating a playable race suffering from addiction, showing the horrifying consequences through wretched NPCs, then moving on like it's normal. Your Blood Elf character is in recovery every day, forever. The hunger never goes away. The Sunwell just manages it. But at least Blood Elves had a civilization to lose. They had Silvermoon City, the Sunwell, thousands of years of history before addiction consumed them. They remember what they were before Arthas destroyed everything. Unlike one race that was created specifically to be second-class citizens in a faction that barely tolerates them, a race that exists in constant agony and knows hell waits for them when they die. Forsaken, eternal torture as faction identity. The Forsaken are former citizens of Lord Aeron who died to the plague, rose as undead scourge, broke free from Lich King control, and joined the Horde. Every single one of them is in constant physical and emotional agony. And that's before Sylvanas starts committing genocides. Blizzard made undead a playable race, not cool undead like vampire lords. Rotting corpses who feel every moment of decay, remember their deaths, and exist in a state Sylvanas herself described as worse than hell. Travel to Deathnell in Tirisful Glades. You'll start your Forsaken journey waking up in a grave. An Undertaker tells you that you died, were raised by the Scourge, and somehow broke free when the Lich King's power weakened. You stumble out, confused, disoriented. The first quest, your body is weak. You need to understand what you've become. You're sent to look at your own corpse in a mirror. The starting experience doesn't sugarcoat it. NPCs describe the cold, the emptiness, the way food tastes like ash, how positive sensations, warmth, comfort, joy are muted or gone completely. You can't feel the sun's warmth, can't enjoy a meal, can't experience most of what made life worth living. What you do feel is decay, your body rotting, the constant awareness that you're a walking corpse and you remember everything. Your death, your time as a mindless Scourge servant, the people you killed while under Lich King control. Every Forsaken carries those memories. Quest text shows NPCs recognizing former family members among other undead. Imagine seeing your murdered spouse shambling around Brill as a fellow Forsaken. That's the daily reality. But here's where it gets cosmically worse. Sylvanas Windrunner, leader of the Forsaken, threw herself off the top of Icecrown Citadel after Arthas died. She wanted oblivion, death as escape from undeath. What she found instead was darkness, worse than anything she'd experienced. The short story Edge of Night describes her vision: endless torment, cold beyond measure, awareness without end. Hell, basically. And Valkyr pulled her back from it. That's when she learned the truth. When Forsaken died, that's where they go. Not to the Shadowlands proper, not to any afterlife based on their life's deeds, just darkness and torment. Every single Forsaken faces that fate, they know it. Sylvanas told them in Cataclysm, "The Forsaken are my bulwark against the infinite. I will let no one carelessly toss away my defenses." Read that again. My bulwark. My defenses. Forsaken aren't people to Sylvanas, they're shields between her and hell. She raises more Forsaken to have more bodies standing between her and the infinite darkness. That's why she keeps the Valkyr around. That's why she starts raising new undead against their will. Every new Forsaken is another barrier against her personal damnation, and the Forsaken know this. Quest text in Silverpine Forest during Cataclysm has NPCs talking about it. Dark Lady watch over you takes on a darker meaning when you realize she's watching over them the way a general watches over expendable troops. They're not her people, they're her buffer, but it gets worse during battle for Azeroth. We learn Sylvanas made a deal with the jailer. Every soul she sends to the Shadowlands empowers him. The burning of Teldrassil, calculated to maximize casualties. The plague bombs at Lordaeron, maximum death. The Forsaken think they're fighting for survival, for their right to exist in a world that hates them. Actually, they're weapons in a cosmic scheme to fuel a death god's plans. Here's the part nobody talks about. New Forsaken are raised from people who just died. The Forsaken starting experience shows you as a recently deceased Lord Aeron citizen. Maybe you were a farmer, a guard, a parent. You died, screaming to the plague, woke up as a rotting monster, and now you're collecting mushrooms for alchemy supplies. The game treats existential horror as a normal Tuesday. The racial abilities reflect this. Will of the Forsaken makes you immune to fear, sleep, and charm effects for 5 seconds. Why? Because you've already experienced worse. What could possibly scare an undead who knows hell waits for them? Touch of the Grave drains life from enemies and heals you. Cannibalize lets you eat corpses to regenerate. These aren't cool vampire powers, these are the abilities of something that shouldn't exist, desperately clinging to not life by consuming the dead, and Forsaken Society reflects this desperation. The Royal Apothecary Society develops new plague strains despite Garrosh Hellscream explicitly forbidding it. The Wrathgate incident in Wrath of the Lich King shows Forsaken deploying plague that kills Alliance, Horde, and Scourge indiscriminately. Grand Apothecary Putris wasn't acting alone. He had supporters, resources, an entire faction of Forsaken who decided plague was their path forward. Sylvanas uses the plague anyway. During battle for Gilneas, Garrosh sends High Overlord Sarfang to ensure she doesn't deploy it. She lies to his face, tells him production has ceased, then orders her forces to deploy it as planned the moment he leaves. Gilneas gets bathed in plague, Worgen and humans die screaming. Sylvanas raises the corpses as new Forsaken against their will. That's the other thing. Being raised Forsaken isn't a choice for most. Sylvanas decides who gets raised. Valkyr performed the ritual. You wake up undead whether you wanted it or not. Some newly raised Forsaken immediately try to kill themselves again. Can't do it. Valkyr bring them back. You're trapped in undeath with no escape except the hell waiting beyond. Battle for Azeroth introduced Kalia Menethil as light-forged Forsaken. She died, got raised by the light instead of shadow magic, and exists as undead infused with holy power. She feels warmth, can experience positive emotions, isn't in constant agony. This proves undeath can be different, which makes regular Forsaken even more cursed by comparison. There's a better version of undeath possible. They're just stuck with the torture version. Dark Ranger Velenara tells you during a quest that Sylvanas pulled her back from beyond and damned her soul into service. That's the language she uses. Damned. Sylvanas doesn't resurrect loyal servants. She damns them, condemns them to the same eternal torment she's trying to avoid, and they're supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to serve. The Before the Maw was retconned quest in Shadowlands had Forsaken literally saying they know they're going to hell when they die. It wasn't subtext, it was text. Explicit confirmation that undeath leads to damnation. Then Blizzard partially walked it back in later patches, but the damage was done. Players saw it. Forsaken players had to process that their character's final reward for everything is supernatural torture. Community reaction has been split for 20 years. Are Forsaken victims or villains? Sympathetic survivors of tragedy or monsters who commit war crimes? Every expansion adds more evidence to both sides. Wrath shows them deploying plague at Wrathgate, killing their own faction members. Cataclysm shows them raising new Forsaken against their will. Battle for Azeroth shows them as tools in Sylvanas' schemes. Shadowlands reveals she was working for the jailer the whole time. This is supposed to be a power fantasy? Pay $15 a month to roleplay cosmic horror. Experience what it's like to be damned while still ambulatory. Blizzard saw that pitch and said, yes, perfect, this is fine. But at least the Forsaken chose undeath over oblivion when they broke free from the Lich King. They made that choice consciously knowing the alternative. Nobody asked the Worgen if they wanted to become feral wolf monsters who periodically lose their humanity and slaughter everything around them. That curse was inflicted on them by their own archdruid's desperation. If you enjoyed this deep dive into WoW's darkest race lore and want to see more Blizzard storytelling failures exposed, check out the next video.